So I'm just gonna free flow on some observations that I have been making around the V. Um, I am choosing to use that because of the stupid sticker at the bottom and the shadow banning and stuff. I just don't want my account associated with that in the algorithm. Um, so I talk a lot about duality and multidimensionality. It's a big part of what I explore when I meditate and in my spiritual work. So I think a lot about polarity and oneness and spectrums and fluidity, and it's just like how my brain works. Um, and I'm always like seeing patterns in the collective in terms of like things we decide to do collectively and what I'm seeing in like mainstream media, what I see on social media, the energy that I feel, like what I intuitively observe, and how I um, can see things unfolding. Um, and I've been wanting to write about this, but it's not, I don't know, it's not coming out in writing for me. And I just feel like I need to maybe speak it out loud. I also think not a lot of people are talking about this in a way that is conducive to listening and exploring and sharing and um, having like neutral discussions. We're seeing the polarities get really loud. So people who are really far on the ends and there's not enough like merging. And one of the main things that I'm observing is the I mean, I would almost use the word danger in um, political thinking and like bucketing yourself into political boxes. So the right and the left, Democrats, Republicans, or conservatives and liberals. It's a big thing that I'm seeing being used against the people and the population in general. Um, I know this because I feel this and I see it, but I also know it from like a very just tangible, um, three-dimensional strategic frame of mind. Anyone who works in marketing or in public relations, or in like business or advertising, like you know how that works. People study demographics and then study their behaviors and what they're likely to do with within those behaviors, and then they'll create advertisements or events or um, propaganda or campaigns to um, influence that behavior to come out. Anyways, it's not a surprise that this happens in politics, and this isn't something new that is happening throughout COVID. This is something that has always happened. People use the ability to predict people's behavior based off their programming and their conditioning and their like reactivity to manipulate and kind of string people to create certain outcomes. And I'm not trying to say that in like a scary way. It's just that that's what humanity does a lot of the time, especially in like um, in capitalism when you're selling and buying things. Um, so it's not a surprise to me that um, political parties use um, certain belief systems from that party or the other party to their advantage. What's happening right now is that I am seeing people really, it's like they really want to stick their identity into something that is for or against something that they're for or against. So in this case, I'm talking about specifically, I want to point out Trump trauma. So it's all of these people that are we're traumatized that this person was elected and all of the stuff that came up from that. And so now anything that is associated with Trump or Republicans or the opposite party gets bucketed. I hate this phrase, but it's the phrase that comes up. It's the throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I hate that phrase, but it's an analogy that makes sense. It's like we bucket everything, and instead of like looking at everything neutrally and truthfully from just an observational standpoint, we tie things together in a package, and we're like, okay, that's all of that is for this, and all of that is for this. So freedom is something that is for everyone. It is a neutral thing. It is a core part of our existence. And so I'm seeing the concept of freedom being tied to the Republican Trump supporter arena, the conservative arena of like talking about freedom or medical freedom or being concerned about our freedoms being taken away, censorship being an example, whether it be big or small censorship. That is something that is super faulty in the way that we're operating right now. We can't be tying something that's so basic and good, right? The concept of just freedom into a specific party, because then we're just, what are we doing? Then we're just like bucketing into sides versus thinking holistically about all of the good things that we need. An example, censorship too. It's like anyone who talks about censorship is all of a sudden bucketed into a Trump supporter, which is really funky, to say the least. That's freedom of speech is something that we should all care about. Being able to speak your voice and talk about things freely in a way that you want to talk about them. Take a look at countries that don't have freedom of speech. China, Russia, Cuba, tons more. I don't claim to be a historian or I'm only sharing the examples that I know. But current day, freedom of speech is not available around the globe. So I think that we tend to think in the States that we think that those things happen overnight, and we fail to see how things trickle out from different steps. So I know I'm going kind of all over the place, but I'm just gonna let myself go where I'm going. So I'm going to talk about timelines. Another thing that I'm seeing is we are not able to see timelines from a collective standpoint. I know that there are individuals who are aware of this multidimensional thinking, but not everyone can see things that way, and that's fine. We all have different gifts, but some people have the gift of seeing patterns and seeing timelines that open up. But I think it's something that we all have access to. For example, cause and effect, that's something that we all understand, right? If I push this cup over, if I go to push it, the water is going to fall out, right? So cause and effect is easy for us to grasp. Timelines are very similar, except it's more of dominoes, and not only dominoes, but branches. So it's branches upon branches upon branches upon branches, kind of the way in which fractals work. So it's essentially thinking of things from a very zoomed out perspective, and seeing how one decision opens up the door to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then that opens up the door to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and those open up the door to, okay, so things don't happen overnight. So places like Cuba, that situation is not something that happened overnight. There were steps that happened throughout their history where the people were giving away their power was taken away. Um, Things were done and not done that led to that horrific fiasco that is the current day situation. Um, the way that you are behaving, the way that you're acting, what you're saying, what you're thinking, how you're speaking or not speaking, um, where you are giving your money. So the restaurants and um, stores and places that you're giving your money to are all opening up timelines right now. And specifically related to the V, um, this whole thing of, asking for proof of it, depending on where you live, forcing it, depending on your occupation, it being forced. It opens up certain timelines. And if you even remotely look at history, whenever we are forcing things onto people against their belief system, um, uh, forcing them to do something with their bodies, that's never worked out. It's never been a good thing to force something upon somebody. Um, Also, if you look at the horrific history of Indigenous people um, being raped and um, their belief systems completely humiliated and obliterated. Um, and if you look at the history of the way black and brown bodies have been treated in the medical system, if you look at the birth system and how women's bodies have been treated throughout that system, and a lot of this, still happening in different ways, you can see that when you're forcing, that energy of like force is never the answer. And this is not to, I'm not even trying to talk about like what you should do with your body or what another person should do with their body. I think everyone should do whatever they think is healthy for them and right for them. What I'm talking about is when we're forcing our ideals onto someone else's body, um, particularly right now, like globally, billions of people like forcing something, it's not, it's, if you really tune in to your heart and get really quiet and allow yourself to be present and see your ego and like feel the trauma, feel the emotions, allow yourself to really sit with it, I don't think that, I mean, yeah, I don't think that a lot of people would be like, yeah, that's chill, you know? I think most of us, when we are really connected to the heart and to our intuition, we can tell that something's off. There's like a little, either for some, like it's like, it's off. For others, it's like, whoa, this opens up like some really wild timelines we don't want to get into. But even if this is something that is so different from the way that you think, a big part of why I'm even expressing this is because there is no, there's no like real dialogue. Like people are really scared to talk about this. They're scared to talk about it with their friends. They're scared to talk about it with their families. They're scared to talk about it online. To varying degrees. Um, there's this stigma. And when there's a stigma around talking about something or we make something taboo, there's a lot of stuff that gets suppressed. And it's like a lot of, like, I don't know, I feel it as like a choking energy. Um, when we when we make it wrong to talk about something because it's impolite or it's uncomfortable, or we don't want to stir things up, or we don't want to be wrong, we don't want someone to not like us because we think a certain way. Um, when that happens, our authenticity gets really, really suppressed, and our individuality and uniqueness gets really, really suppressed. And part of the way that we progress in this world is by allowing ourselves to be our truth and truly ourselves, and like continually, like like it's almost like a cocoon, right? Like these cocoon layers that keep coming off and coming off, so that we can express more of the light of who we each individually are. And so um, I want to express that, we need to hear what you think, and whether that's even just you being honest with yourself, or you talking to your partner or your friend or your family, or sharing a post of some sort, um, um, or even just exploring what you think from a more present, divinely neutral place. Um, Creating art, we need you to create art. Like right now, it's a time where um, we need to really nourish authenticity. So whether that's through speaking, sharing, asking questions, creating art, um, movement, like getting really pulling it back in, so that you can um, come out more. And um, collectively, I see this like solar plexus throat chakra tightening, where it's like no one wants to like, everyone's walking on eggshells. And this is something that's the whole thing about passports, and you know proof of or I saw something today about San Francisco restaurants or bars, uh, like 500 of them, you know, signing up to form this alliance of like only V'd people can come in. Um, no matter what your opinion is, like it's important to talk about it, because um, it's the only way that we'll find solutions. Like the point of communication is that like our perspectives can kind of merge and dance together and flow in a way that allows us to kind of peer into new windows, and through those new windows is how we start to see like, oh, this is what we're missing, this is like hidden in the shadow, this is uh, how we can move forward, et cetera, et cetera. But if we're all just like shut up and closeted in and like faking our experience, it's not going to be a good thing. Especially when we're handing over so much power to the media or politicians or governments, telling us what is right and what to do and how to think, and um, what's right and what is wrong, and like all of that gunk that we need to step away from if we're wanting to um, live more freely and from the heart. If we're wanting to be more in harmony with the earth. And these are all topics. Something else too that I think we don't talk about, we don't see. We think of things as separate, like everything's separate. Like climate change is separate, women's rights separate, um, the V stuff separate, COVID stuff separate, like uh, what's you know racism separate. Like they're all combined and intertwined, and when you zoom out you can see more of the energy behind it and how those energies correlate and affect each other. And that's going back to the beginning. That's another reason why I feel like this polarity of bucketing into like left and right is so dangerous because we start to bucket things that we should all care about into certain sides, and so for fear of being associated with that side, we decide that we don't care about it, and we won't speak about it. So then we just keep having these like halvesies of stuff where it's like, well, half people care about this, half, and this doesn't mean we all have to, be passionate about the same topics, but it's the fact that we're not seeing that they're connected. Um, the Earth's energy and the balance and the harmony um, on the planet is very much affected by the balance and harmony that we have within ourselves and with each other. And so if we want to um, create more harmony with the land and the soil, the trees, the animals, we've wrecked the planet. So if we're wanting to move to a place to where we are um, rectifying our connection and our harmony with the planet, to have greater health um, here, and greater connection and life force here, um, we need to start to really see how everything's interconnected. Um, Something that is helpful is thinking about separation consciousness, so separation mentality. Um, when we start to segregate and divide um, people, and these people get this people get that, you get this, you get that, you have access to this, you don't have access to that, there are problems that ensue. Um, and these are very complex topics. I'm not saying that I know everything, that I have answers. I don't. I just have a lot of musings, and I philosophize about all of these things. I have a need to express them. Um, so these are very complex and multidimensional topics in and of themselves. But if we're not talking about them and exploring them, then we're not going to be able to move forward in a way that is organic and fluid and fueled by like the deep, 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 deep knowing of wisdom that we have within each and every person. And I think where people mistake unity consciousness, or where they misinterpret unity consciousness, is that people think that we all have to be the same, and that we all have to think the same in order to reach that unity. Um, and that's not the case at all. I mean, it's, I think, impossible to do that. I mean, we're all so unique. We all have different gifts. We all have different talents. We all have different traumas that we're healing. We all have had different experiences that create our understanding and our view of the world. And it's a matter of really seeing how differences and uniqueness can be of service to the unity, versus seeing it as something that is a disservice. Um, and we're learning that, you know, and again, this is another example of like, okay, we're learning that through gender, right? Where we're seeking equality. We're learning that about the LGBTQ community. We're harnessing the love that we have for all, no matter what your lifestyle is, and so we're supporting that, and we're talking about that, and we're getting that out there. And then, but then, it's like that same energy doesn't go toward everyone. It's like we're like, okay, well, let's focus on this, and then anyone who's has opposite views as me, or anyone who doesn't agree to have the same viewpoint on COVID, or it's like we compartmentalize our acceptance and our love and our fighting for each other, not fighting each other. Something else that's coming to me now too is that there's like a lot of this, right? And when we're doing this, it keeps us really distracted on the bigger picture of things, and keeps us really distracted on the the establishments that are benefiting from all of this, from all of the butting heads and the fighting and the division, and this is right, this is, we're right, we're wrong. Like, there needs to be more unification around our common denominators and like what we're all seeking. We can all agree that we're all seeking, I I believe we're all seeking clean water, clean food, freedom, freedom of speech. What are all these core values that aren't widely available that we need to figure out, and that we need to hold systems and people accountable for destroying too. And granted, I think that we're all a part of, problems, that when there are problems and imbalances, that everyone is, somehow involved, but it's to varying degrees, right? And when you have companies that are not liable at all for, poisons and toxins that they're putting into the soil or what have you, there's a problem there when we're looking at each other and fighting your neighbor, and instead you're not looking at the things that are causing a lot of the bigger problems. Also, just because you are against Trump and against, a majority of Republican values does not mean you have to support Biden and Kamala Harris. I'm seeing this like blindfold of people who, just because of that Trump trauma that I was talking about, it's just like, okay, well, let's put all of our eggs in this basket, and let's just pretend like it's all fine and good and dandy, and let's not question any sort of darkness or anything. And if you do question it, then you're on the other side, then you're a Trump supporter and you're a bad person. That's complete distortion, complete just silliness, to say the least. It's really simple. That's very, very simple-minded to not allow yourself and not allow others to question the people who are currently leading our country, if you're in the U.S., but this applies to wherever you're at. I would advise you to kind of look into in yourself how you might be doing this, because I do notice this a lot, both in with my peers and on social media, where it's just like, wow, like what you feel like you want to stand up for people who are misrepresented and underrepresented and disadvantaged, but then you're allowing these people to go just to get a jail out of, what is that? Get the card out of jail. What is that phrase? Okay, the phrase isn't coming to me, but to go, just things to slide on by because it's like, oh, well, we won't look at that. Well, at least they're not that bad. I think we need a certain level of maturity to be applied to the way that we talk about how we want to move forward in the world and what we want to do. A big part of that is really getting in touch with you in terms of remaining present and acknowledging your triggers. If you can't have a discussion where, you're not, most people don't listen. They're just trying to think of what they want to say next and how they're going to defend themselves. We need to have true dialogue and true conversations where we're listening to each other. I mean, it boggles my mind that we don't even have, if there are polarities showing themselves, okay, particularly about the V, right, where there's people that are convinced that it's the most horrific thing to happen, and there are people that are convinced that it's this like complete and utter blessing and they will not question it, right? So those two polarities, and then everything in the middle, right? But how is it, there's scientific communities on both sides, how is it that we're not having like public debates about that? Why wouldn't we have people from both sides like on the news or at the White House and like having like a legitimate like mature debate, like they did in, I think, Grecian times, right, where it's like the art of debate. Debate is an art, and I think that is, and I'm not talking about arguing, I'm talking about very like present, um, almost neutral debate, but not indifference. More so, the neutrality that comes from wanting to explore and listen, versus attack. Um, so, yeah, I don't know where to end this, but I feel like that's all I wanted to say for now. And I, I want to um, encourage you to get really real about how you feel and like how this has all affected you, and the fear that everyone's feeling, and what it is that you're ignoring and wanting to, what parts of the shadow are you trying to hide, whether it's collective or individually. Like, what's the painful stuff you don't want to look at? um, are you questioning things? That you have discernment. This has been a huge wound perpetuated by the censorship, is, when we talk about like misinformation, and um, there's this, we all have discernment, and I trust that you have your discernment and that others have discernment, and that we all have our own abilities to decide what is and isn't right for us to see, not to see, what isn't something that we buy, something that we believe in, or that we take on as our own. But so when you start to tell people that they're not allowed to see what those other options even are, there's a red flag there, because it's basically saying, hey, you're dumb. You're not allowed to decide what is true for you. I will decide for you. And no, you can't see that. You can't handle that. Like, that's not for you. Trust us. Trust us. We're sifting out that stuff. Um, yeah. So there's a lot, and I just genuinely wanted to encourage you to express, and to know that no matter what you think and how you feel, you are worthy of sharing that in whatever way you feel is expressive to you. But know that like the earth needs you to really open, share, discuss, and feel and not judge your feelings. And through that ability to recognize our triggers is how we're able to communicate. And all of this bullshit about attacking each other and canceling each other, and it's this digital stoning. In old times, where they'd put someone in the town square and they'd like have this gruesome stoning of the person because they were a witch or whatever it was. They were questioning the government, or whatever. This is that canceling is digital stoning, and we can have much more mature and evolved conversations, and ultimately assist more in growth and um, in more elevated heart-based thinking, when we listen, and when we allow people to express themselves, and um, when we nurture our ability to see darkness, um, without then creating more darkness, because darkness does not solve darkness. So I'll leave it there. I don't know if I'll leave comments on or off. I might turn them off, but you can DM me, and take care of yourself, and sending you lots of love.